Podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Haway The Podcast. It's Martin here, and today we're bringing you the first and what we hope will be a regular addition to our usual podcast lineup. So if you're a regular visitor to the Roker Report website, you'll be pretty familiar with our On This Day feature, which looks back at something that happened on this day in the history of Sunderland Association Football Club. It could be something big, it could be something small, it could be something incredibly niche. And somebody, it might have been me, it might not have been, thought it could be a good idea to turn that concept into a podcast. So welcome to the very first edition of On This Week. We thought On This Day would be a bit too much of an effort to do. So we're going to all get together and talk about some of the things that happened on this week in the course of Sunderland history. Joining me to help do that are a few members of our On This Day team. And first up, in a bit of a role reversal, is Chris Wynn. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. It was tempting to do On This Day, wasn't it? I mean, you know, that would have been
good. Hey,
if you had all the time in the world just to do an On This Day every day, I mean, that would be perfect, wouldn't it?
Hey, you never know. Don't rule it out. We could do it, couldn't we?
I hope so.
And you know what? If you talk about niche references, for me, this feels like that 6-month spell when Marco Gabbiadini wore number 9 and Billy Whitehurst wore number 10, because the shirt swap here is a funny one.
Well, see, that's freaked us out more than being on this side of the fence, to be honest. That Gabbiadini wearing that just doesn't work, does it?
No, I'm not saying who's who, which one of us is Billy Whitehurst and which one's Marco, but we'll I'm
sure if we had a fight, we'd find out.
There's an easy way to find out, isn't there?
Yeah.
And also joining me today is a man whose stories of supporting Sunderland over the generations are pretty legendary among the Roker Report team and have become legendary among readers of the site. It's Kelvin Beattie.
Good morning. How are you this morning, lad?
Yes, no, all very good here. Looking forward to getting stuck into some historical and anecdotal crawl through of what's gone on.
Yeah.
130 odd years. None of us go back that far, so.
I'm still musing over Big Billy Whitehurst, and a good lad to go for a drink with, Billy. I'm not so sure about the football.
I'm sure if you had a bet, if you had a quid on the first player to get mentioned on this new pod, Billy Whitehurst would have had fairly long odds, but there you go. And finally joining us today, another member of the Roker Report On This Day team, and somebody who actually does all of this history stuff properly, writes books and things like that. It's Andrew Smithson.
Hello, this is exciting, isn't it?
Isn't it just?
Yeah. Should be good fun, like you say, 130 odd years, so plenty to keep us going, I think.
There's one or two things to get stuck into, isn't there? So look, we thought we'd start this podcast on the week commencing the 5th of May, because traditionally it's been a pretty quiet and uneventful week in Sunderland history, but we have managed to find one or two things to talk about. And the first one we're going to dive into is something that happened on the 5th of May, 1928. And that was Sunderland's longest serving manager, I think, Andrew Robert Kyle, retired from the club after managing for a pretty unbelievable 23 years, which if you put it into today's sort of currency, it's an unbelievably long spell of time, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean we've started with a big one here, Martin. I think, as you say, 23 years. So he's our longest serving, secretary. Kind of manager stroke secretary. I think back in those days the job was slightly different, but yeah, Robert Hugh Kyle, born December 1870 in Belfast. The stats, as I say, longest serving. He took charge of 817 competitive games. So yeah, he's. I think he went through plenty with Sunderland. And what he's probably best remembered for is the 1912-1913 season. He'd first come in 1905, so it took him a while, but 1912-1913, I think a lot of us would say that was our best ever season. We won the league, and under Kyle, we got to the cup final for the first time.
So he came in to a relative or a very successful club, really, doesn't he? What was his background before he came to Sunderland?
Yeah, as you say, it was a successful club, but there's been a bit of disgrace, really. The season before,
illegal
the club
payment.
had been
Just put it bluntly, Andrew. Illegal payments. That's what.
Come on, I'm
Just
I'm
get it
trying
out
to keep
there.
everybody out of trouble here. But yeah, illegal payments. So his predecessor, Alex Mackey, left at the end of 1904-05. Everybody seemed to think Fred Dale, a former player, was going to take over. But in the end, they shortlisted Kyle from 70 applicants, seemingly. The chairman, a fella called F.W. Taylor, he was known in the area as Mr. Sunderland. He highlighted Kyle from all of these applicants. And I think one of the reasons why he was identified was because Kyle had previously been a secretary in Ireland. He was a former goalkeeper, but having also had a day job, he worked in a drapery. A drapery, I'm not quite sure what that entails. But yeah, he worked there alongside playing football. So when he became a secretary of distillery, I think he had a bit of business sense, a bit of business acumen. And with the financial issues previously, he stood out as somebody who could kind of come in and get a grip with money and perhaps increase revenues and get things above board.
I think when you look back at the record books, it seemed to take him a little while to get going. But then, as you say, we had quite a lot of success, certainly on the field, not necessarily translating into too many honours, apart from what you outlined in terms of the league and the FA Cup, which I think if you're going to put that again into today's terms, you'd be bloody happy with that if we'd won that in the last 50 years, wouldn't you? But what sort of kind of kick started that success?
Well, just going back to the cup, I think at the moment I'd be happy with an FA Cup, just a win and a single tie. Never mind the competition.
A fourth round game.
Yeah, it took him a couple of years to get his feet under the table, but over time he chipped away. He bought quality players in different positions. I think some of the names are players who even now a lot of fans know about. There's L.R. Roos, who was a goalkeeper and, fair to say, a bit of a character.
Tell you what, by the way, Andrew, I'm sure you've read that book, but if somebody is listening to this and wants to have a really good read, the book about him is brilliant.
It's on my long list. I'm aware of it, and I assume it's just a bizarre, well, not a bizarre fella, but an interesting fella. So yeah, there was L.R. Roos, Charlie Buchan, again, a name everybody knew about from the history of Sunderland. And I think the signing that perhaps made the biggest difference was a fella called Charlie Thompson. If you look back through the books, he's a big strapping fella, absolutely fantastic moustache. You know, I mean, for that alone, he should be well remembered. But what I liked about him was when he was bought, there was a maximum transfer fee in place of £350. What Kyle did to get round that, when we signed him from Hearts, the same day we kind of bought an understudy goalkeeper for the same amount, a lad called Thomas Hallen. He did play a few times, but he was an understudy. He perhaps wasn't worth £350 alone, but you know, a bit of smart thinking again. Perhaps going back to Kyle and his business acumen, he's come up with a way around things that wasn't as dodgy as those illegal payments.
And Chris, he's one of those names that you look back through the record books and you immediately kind of stands out to you, doesn't he? He's a pretty recognisable name in Sunderland folklore and legend, I guess.
Well, he is for a few reasons. I mean, you already touched on like how long he served, but you were putting that into context, and obviously you kind of put that up against the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson, don't you, in terms of that longevity, but obviously a different age. But, when you look at the age he kind of managed in, he went right across kind of the Edwardian era, World War One, and kind of between the wars, which, if you put it into that context with everything going on around him, that he stayed in that role is pretty incredible. And the fact, when I started, you start looking into him, that he just comes from distillery. In Ireland,
Yeah.
It's not like, we snapped him up from Arsenal or something, or from up the road or something like that. Like we plucked him from distillery, and then he went on to become. And I think this is still a fact, but I was looking at this that he's the only Irishman ever to win the league championship, apparently, as manager. I don't know whether that's still. I'm sure that's still a fact, but yeah, and that, as Andrew said, that secretary manager role, that he didn't just deal with tactics and all that sort of stuff, and he took over. Talk about pressure. He was like the David Moyes of his time, wasn't he? Taking over from Watson, who was kind of that successful, even though obviously we had the illegal, the Swindon Town style illegal payments going on. But the other big, we talked about turning points. The other big thing was, and I'll just put it out there, you've probably got it in front of you, knowing you three, but 5th of December 1908. Big date in Sunderland history, lads. Anyone?
Yeah. I mean, it's a big date, perhaps one of the biggest. I would argue.
Oh, absolutely, 9-1. We're big Newcastle United.
Yeah.
And I think, and if you look at the kind of the years, that was the season. That was in the December of the season. He finished 14th, 10th, then 16th, and then in that season he finished 3rd. And that game was in the December of that season. So it's almost like a turning point that he did that. But he's got for a kind of a Sunderland manager. And look, you can go back, whatever. I mean, it's the history of the club. People go, oh, well, it's way back then. It doesn't, it's too far back. But it doesn't. It's the history of the club, and we were competing in the football league champions, runners up in the FA Cup, then finished runners up in the league in a few years later, about a decade later. But to build the club back up, which he had to do, because you look at those first few years, it looks like Andrew, as he said, he had to kind of dismantle things and build it again. But 20 odd years, I mean, it's good that we're talking about him now.
Without doubt. I mean, as you say, we're talking about him now. In recent seasons, I think it might have been Leicester went to Southampton and had a couple of. Did they win something like 9-0? And of course, you see on the TV when they bring up the stats, who was the last team to win by such a big margin. And it's great, isn't it, when Sunderland are on there as one of the early giants.
On the old video printer, it would have spelt it out, wouldn't it? It would have went N-I, then put it in brackets.
You've had to typeset the letters before you could put it, wouldn't you? Well, it was the same recently, wasn't it? Where after Liverpool had won the league the other day, had the list of clubs who'd won the most league titles, and we still sneak on the bottom of that list. So it's
one quick question I've got, might be one for Andrew, I don't know, but the illegal payments thing, and I've seen it when you read up about it. It's called the McCombie affair. I don't know if you know what the background was.
Yeah, McCombie was a player for us. I think he was a defender, Chris. There was a dispute. I think he was given a payment by the club. Some people suggest that was a loan for expenses and what have you. Some people suggest it was an outright payment. When the club wanted their money back, I think that kind of put his nose out of joint. He ended up moving to Newcastle. He was at Newcastle for decades, I believe. But the aftermath of him leaving Sunderland was that he wasn't happy about this disputed payment. So I believe he was the one who was the whistleblower, went to the authorities. I dare say a lot of clubs had similar situations in place, but as I say, his nose was out of joint. Questions started getting asked, and Sunderland were the ones who, not for the first time, were the ones who kind of made an example of because of all of that.
I wonder if it was a distant relative of Bill Bradshaw who investigated it. You never know.
Yeah.
Hey, you wouldn't be surprised, would you? And Kelvin, when you look back on these managers that we had, because you look in again the record books, and Johnny Cochran came in afterwards. He managed 500 games, I think. So in 34 years, we had 2 managers. And the modus operandi, I guess, was to give managers good periods of time to actually turn things around and get success and build something, rather than that instant fix that we've got now.
You have to wonder, given the turnover of managers, that revolving door that we've had at Sunderland, that they went on to something back then. It takes time to build. Kyle got that time. I did wonder, his history out of football in drapery. Do you think they hired him to draw a curtain on the scandal that had gone off?
You're very good.
It's just a thought. But looking at Kyle, I mean, his longevity was amazing. His ability to keep bringing great players in. Somebody mentioned that before, There's one lad I've always loved reading about, Charlie Buchan. When I was a kid, we used to get the Charlie Buchan annual for Christmas, and it took us ages. Did you ever see them, the Charlie Buchan annuals? Yeah, fantastic. And I honestly, I would be about 11 years old before I realised his Sunderland history. I just got these at Christmas, and I had loads of them. I must have had about 14, 15 by the time I started selling them to fund my away trips. So he would bring these great players in. Charlie Buchan, that very successful year. I can always remember my dad telling us about the front line that his dad used to talk about. So Buchan and a chap called Richardson that played centre forward, Mordew, Holly. These were people that his dad said were it was the best forward line in the country at the time. And they weren't Sunderland fans, were actually Newcastle fans, but recognised that front five as fearsome in that era. So Buchan was certainly one that caught my imagination. Another lad that came along just a little bit later in Kyle's career was Dave Halliday. And when you mentioned books before, I thought I remember, and it's just come to us, The Forgotten Legend, it's called, Dave Halliday. If you like a good book, that is a cracking read. And Halliday, I think, came from Hearts as well, if my memory serves as well. So we obviously had a bit of money and a bit of player exchange going on with the old Jambos back then. But he was a fantastic goal scorer, Halliday, and Kyle obviously could recognise these great players. Which has to be one of the gifts of the manager's role at the time. It's all changed now, but at the time they had to be all singing, all dancing, I think.
You kind of wonder whether when that secretary manager sort of role changed into just being a manager, you had a similar thing to what we've had over the last decade, where people are going, I don't want to be a head coach, I want to be a manager. You had the same thing. I want to do all the books, and I want to do all the other stuff as well. So
they seem to be doing less and less, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you suggesting that Chocolate Tony would have done a good job in that era?
Hey, you never know, do you? But when you look back on Kyle's long career at Sunderland, the last game could have been pretty terrible for him, really. It was obviously the same day he retired, so the 5th of May 1928, and we played a game at Ayresome Park. And the season before that, I think we finished 3rd in the league, but we struggled a bit this season. And on the last day of the campaign, 2 clubs from 5 could have gone down. And we faced Middlesbrough, who were another club who could have gone down, at Ayresome Park. I think only 2 points were separating the bottom 9 at the end of the season. Andrew, this could have put a little bit of a footnote against his career at Sunderland, couldn't it, if he'd been the first manager to take us down?
Definitely. The years before that, we weren't winning things, but we were up near the top. A lot of third place finishes. We'd finish runners up, and then, as you say, we're part of this big group of teams that on the day of our last game, very real chance of us being relegated. And had that happened, it's guesswork, but the club could have been very different from that point. But yes, massive game against Middlesbrough.
And when you look back on the record books, and it's a 3-0 game, it looks like a fairly routine game, but it probably doesn't tell the full story.
No, you're right. As you say, on paper, 3-0 should be happy days, but as often is the case going into the game, we had injuries. Our goalkeeper, Albert McInroy, I can spell it, but I can't pronounce it. He had to be rushed back to play. He was our goalkeeper. He played for England, great servant for the club, but he was injured and he had to be strapped up with, I don't know if this is something the current lot would do. I can't quite see Job having to play with eel skin strappings to help him get through the game. Not sure how that would go. But yeah, they patched him up. They got him into the team. 5th of May, obviously, in later years is well known for a particular double save from Jimmy Montgomery. But however many years earlier, he did a similar crucial double save. We had to clear an effort off the line. So we were really under the cosh, but we got those 3 goals. And that was it, really. That was what got us out of the mire.
Tell you what, if you look at this league, I mean, if there's ever an advert to go back to 2 points for a win, I mean that's it, isn't it? Just look at how the league finished that season. You look at the bottom 12 sides are separated by 4 points, and the whole league is separated by just 16 points.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
We finished 15th, and Dave Halliday scored 35 goals. I mean, those are the days, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Well, Dave Halliday, I think, was actually one of our less expensive signings. In the 20s, we broke the world transfer fee 2 or 3 times. We managed to do it twice in 2 days, which is just staggering, really. Often, though, those really expensive signings didn't quite hit the mark. Whereas, Halliday's come in, wasn't necessarily a big money signing, but his goals, I mean, it was, for a lot of seasons, it's virtually a goal a game. And when you're down there at the bottom, having a player who can be relied on is huge.
As Chris said, there was such a tight league going on. It finished brilliantly. Borough went down by virtue of us winning that game. I think they only needed to draw and they would have stayed up. So we sent them down. And only 7 points separated 4th place Derby from Borough, who'd finished bottom. I think if that was your final day of Super Sunday now, I think Peter Drew would spontaneously combust.
One thing I would say that makes this game perhaps even more intriguing, and particularly in the context of Kyle, and again, this would have made for pretty interesting watching if you were sat down on your sofa watching it on Sky. Kyle, although technically still in charge, had announced his resignation a couple of months earlier. There'd been a few rumours of fallings out with the board, which just goes to show it doesn't matter how long you've been in post, how successful you've been, things can still deteriorate. So he actually announced his resignation on the back of a 5-1 win over Arsenal, but despite that, I think a few people had perhaps seen it coming, that there was this breakdown. And it meant that on the day we played Middlesbrough, Kyle, although officially in charge, left the running of the team to a long-serving trainer called Billy Williams, who is another one. If you look through the old photos, he just looks like somebody you would not want to mess with. If he was my trainer and he was telling me to do hill runs, I'd be doing hill runs. But it's a bit of a shame that it ended like that. His final day in charge, he wasn't involved in the team selection and tactics, from what I can make out. And also on the same day, sat in the crowd, was Johnny Cochran. So the fella who's been brought in to take over from Kyle and to build from his foundations, he was already there watching the game. Had we been relegated, his job becomes very different, and we maybe don't have some of the successes that follow.
No, that's right. Could be a whole different story, couldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. But on that Billy Williams thing, I was just I was reading that he left at the same time, Andrew, and he'd been there since 1897. So that must have been a huge thing for him to leave. And I was and the thing, because when I've read about it, there was one comment that talked about Kyle's resignation is causing quite the sensation in footballing circles, which obviously reads like a paper at the time. But
yes.
But yeah, the fact that he left. But the other thing was the directors gave him a cheque for £1,000. I mean, was that as much to say, there you go, bugger off, or was that just that the done thing?
Hush money. Hush money.
We've already mentioned illegal payments, so I wouldn't want to say anything that could be wrong. But yes, it was in wider circles, it was seen as a shock. But I think behind the scenes, when you look at the papers, there was suggestion of these issues, and perhaps it was a case of thanks for your service. Here's a cheque. Shake hands, we all move on. Thanks very much. You've got to remember, lads, he's obviously gone and pumped that money directly into his drapery business. So, that could have gone a long way.
You've got to cut your cloth,
Hey. One final point I will say about the Middlesbrough game in particular, and I love things like this. Obviously, Middlesbrough's not too difficult to get to, even back in that era. There was a certain young fan in the crowd. I don't know if any of you spotted this, but a certain young Sunderland fan travelled down called Raish Carter. So I quite like that. The player who in the 30s went on to achieve so much. He was still just like us, a lad who supported his team and supported them and wanted to see them do well. And he perhaps might not have thought that in a few years' time he'd be the one on the pitch scoring the goals and doing the business.
And of course, he had a little spell as manager of Middlesbrough as well, didn't he? Towards the end of his managerial career, so double connection there.
Yeah,
in the game that we're talking about there, Billy Death got our winner, or the third goal in the 60th minute. And it always reminded me of a story my granddad always told about. And I don't know if it would have been Billy Death, or it would have been somebody with the same surname, but my granddad always told the story of having the football commentary on in the kitchen. My grandmother wasn't a football supporter at all. And the commentator said, such and such has been overcome by death. And she just went, Jesus, Mary, and Holy Ghost. So yeah, that's always stuck with me and jumped out when I saw the surname Death there.
Yeah. He had a killer touch, that lad.
A killer. Have you pre-planned these, Kelvin, or they just it's coming naturally, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on a sort of a serious point, that team that went to Borough for that last game, Kyle's last season, it was Bill Murray's debut season as well. He he joined that season, and so we've got Johnny Cochran in the stand and Bill Murray on the pitch. Kyle certainly had an ability to attract good, hardy players to the club, for sure.
Yeah, not like some of these who maybe you're here for 6 months now, and a couple of years down the line you've even forgotten they exist.
Yeah,
like you say, fly by nights. These people obviously thought, oh well, if I'm going to move to Sunderland, I'll make a proper job of it and spend 20 odd years here.
Well, saying that, I mean, he ended up staying around the Sunderland area and living there until he died, didn't he?
Ah, well, that was something I wasn't sure about.
I didn't know that.
He ended up. I think his funeral. I think it was a couple of months after he turned 70. He passed away, and his funeral service was held at Northbridge Street Presbyterian Church.
I didn't know that.
And so he stayed. Stayed around the Sunderland area. What I read was that apparently towards the end in his later years, he was in and out of the Royal Infirmary in Sunderland. So he suffered from a lot of ill health in his later years.
Yeah, probably the stress of the relegation battle. But yes, North Bridge Street there, if I'm thinking of the right place, that's right next to the Stadium of Light and not far from where Roker Park was. So he very much stayed in the area, yeah.
There we go. I didn't know that.
Hey, all of us are learning something there, so it's been worthwhile.
We're here for.
Indeed. Of course, there's been quite a few other off-field things that have happened in this week in Sunderland history. Plenty of birthdays. Emmanuel Giaccherini was born on the 5th of May in 1985, so he celebrates his 40th birthday. George Hurd was born on the 6th of May in 1936. 7th of May, birthday is shared by a former loan keeper, Andy Dibble, Chris Macon, and Eliza Mayenda, who was born in 2005, if you want to feel very, very, very old indeed. Anthony Patterson, it's his birthday this week, born in 2000, so that's a little bit better, but still this millennium. So it
makes me feel old, though.
Here's a question for you. It was a player who was a boyhood Sunderland supporter. He played just 2 games for the club. In 1985, he was a regular at Roker Park after his retirement. He was born on the 11th of May, 1924. A very famous player in Northeast football. Any guesses? Only played 2 games in red and white.
Yeah, that's
Did you say born in 1924?
Born in 1924.
Wow.
No, right not.
Jackie Milburn. There you go.
Wow.
Yes. Very good.
On the field, there's obviously been a lot that's happened in this week in history, obviously coming towards the end of the season. On the 11th of May in both 1991 and 1997, we were relegated from the top flight. So watch what you do on the 11th of May. 7th of May, Gus Poyet oversaw a 2-0 home win over West Brom to cap off the Great Escape with 4 consecutive wins. And even when you look back on that, we don't want to delve into this too much because we'll be here all day, but 7 points adrift with 6 games left. We end up in 14th place, 5 points ahead of relegation, which is a pretty remarkable turnaround, really, isn't it? When you look back, I know we call it the Great Escape, but it truly was quite a significant achievement.
I think at the time, I didn't appreciate just how big a recovery it was. It kind of, when you're in it and you're living it, it just felt like, oh yeah, we've won another game. But yeah, when you now look back at the cold stats, it was a massive revival.
It certainly was.
There was something about him as well, wasn't there? That he had a bit of swagger. And it was, I think, some of it to do with his accent. He had this marvelous way of talking about the game and what his plans were and stuff like that. I just believed everything that he said. I just thought from the moment he come in, this guy's going to do it,
Yeah, he did have a confidence, didn't he? He had that confidence in his own ability that, I think it was probably to his detriment at times as well, but it was kind of, he had 100% confidence in what he was going to do. and how he wanted the team to play and all that sort of stuff. And, that's going to take you quite a way, really, isn't it? Another thing which happened around this week was that 2-0 win at Everton, when Danny Graham managed to score off his arse, which was his only goal in 59 appearances. It was only proper goal anyway. I'm not going to count the Aston Villa one. It was only proper goal in 59 games across 2 spells. Any memories of Danny Graham, lads? No, don't think so.
I'm trying not to say that was a peach of a goal, but
No. We need to keep on Danny Graham's right side, because isn't he involved as an agent now? I think
he's probably mates with Ian Hart, isn't he? That's
well, you joke, but I'm pretty sure he is.
I think he is.
So yeah, we'll maybe leave the.
We'll cut this. Another thing that happened on this week in 2015, Danny Graham scored from 40 yards as we beat Everton 2-0 away at Goodison Park. Right, that'll do. And we are recording this ahead. Obviously, look, people, you might be listening to this in 2050, who knows? But look, we're recording this ahead of our playoff fixtures, ahead of the end of the 24-25 season. And on this week, of course, only a few years ago was the Sheffield Wednesday 2-legged semi-final, which saw us eventually get up from League One. And we've had a few good playoff fixtures over the years, and some bad ones as well. But the Sheffield United one in the late 90s, and this Sheffield Wednesday one, two that really stand out for me, Chris.
Yeah, well, it was a really strange one, wasn't it? When you look back, because it started. I mean, let's just put the playoffs into some context, because it started with a bizarre 6-0 defeat at Bolton. Basically, that's kind of where the story starts, isn't it? Which happened on the 29th of January. But at the time, the league table was bizarre, because we were third in the table, 2 points behind leaders Rotherham and a point behind Wigan Athletic. So we were third in the table. All right, heavy defeat, but we sacked Lee Johnson day after. Well, actually, it was kind of in the hour after, wasn't it? We immediately sacked him. So they must have already been kind of thinking about it, because to sack him so soon after a defeat, you don't do that just on a whim. So, especially being third in the table. So they must have thought, well, he's not the man for us. He's not going to finish the job. Then obviously Mike Dodds takes over, and we, if you remember rightly, we completely made a hash of the basically the recruitment phase, because Mike Dodds had to take over for 2 games. We seemed to be chasing Roy Keane around the country, offering him more and more money every 2 minutes. And I think at one point he was questioned about it on Sky for a game, and he had this smirk on his face, and you wondered whether we all thought, he's after a bit more money or whatever. But while we were waiting around the fuss with Roy Keane, Mike Dodds lost 2 games, one at home to Doncaster, 2-1, and then one away to Cheltenham Town, lost that one 2-1. And then we ended up, chucking the Roy Keane idea and going with Alex Neil, which I think surprised a few people. Not me, because I think I made a few quid out of it at the time. I went on a punt and made a few quid. But yeah, but there's this theory that that we'd lost those 2 games, and Alex Neil kind of bursts through the doors, like the saloon doors, like the scene from The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and he's like he announces that it's fine, I've arrived, I'm going to sort all this out and get you promoted. But it didn't quite work out like that, because in the end, if you include those 2 games that Mike Dodds took charge of, we ended up going 6 games without a win. And at the end of the 6 games, like I said, we were third in the table, a couple of points behind. After the end of those 6 games, it was then the 23rd of February, and we're now 6th in the table, and we're only 3 or 4 points ahead of kind of 9th place, who were Ipswich Town at the time, funnily enough. But in terms of that top 2, we're now 11 points behind Wigan in second, and we are, and I'm just working this out, like 17 points behind Rotherham United. So we lost so much ground in those 6 games that it went from a season of chasing automatic promotion to suddenly going, oh shit, actually we've got a fight on our hands to get in the playoffs. And then you come to the last day of the season, because we went on an incredible run. I think going into the playoffs, we ended up being 17 unbeaten, something like that. But the last day of the season, we were 5th. And it was basically a shootout between Sheffield Wednesday in fourth, who were on 82 points, us in fifth on 81 points. Plymouth were on sixth on 80 points, and then Wickham was seventh on 80 points as well. And Plymouth didn't get the results. Wickham won, we won, and Sheffield Wednesday won, which meant the playoffs would then be MK Dons would play Wickham. MK Dons finishing third, Sheffield Wednesday finishing fourth, and us finishing fifth. I mean, Wigan and Rotherham went up automatically. And if you look at the points total, it wasn't a particularly great league that year, and probably the two biggest sides up there met in the playoffs semi-finals. But just before I bring you guys in on it and like what your memories were before the game, I went back. Wasn't a very good writer doing the preview. It was me, by the way. But I thought I'd just just go through what I wrote in the preview in the build up to the game. I said, yes, we're here once again, the League One playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. It's our fourth year in the league, in the third tier, and our third crack at the extension to the domestic season. It's becoming a regular date in the Sunderland supporter calendar. It's also our seventh attempt at any sort of playoffs, and we are yet to run out winners. Let's not count 1990 as a success, because we were beaten by Swindon Town, and it's maybe about time we did something about it. It's also the first time we have made the playoffs in League One that we seem to be happy to be taking part in, which maybe reflects in the ticket sales as it steadily creeps closer to becoming a sellout at the Stadium of Light. Side found towards the business end of the season. It's a day short of 11 weeks since the lads were on the losing side, where a run of 13 without defeat has followed. And it's been a run based on solid foundation with only 7 goals conceded in that unbeaten run. We have conceded more than 1 goal on only 1 occasion. We also boast the second best home record in the division this season, only behind tonight's opponents, with 16 victories and 4 defeats at the Stadium of Light. We are going into these playoffs as one of the in-form sides. It's just a question of whether or not we can hold our nerve. Now, the point I made there, and it just would be interesting to get your views on it, that actually I thought this was the first time with these playoffs that the other time it was almost a chore that we had to go through it. And this time, because of the way of the season, we were really pleased to just be taking part in it.
Definitely. I remember that running in, as you say, we went a long period without losing, but we needed to. Every time the other scores were coming in, you were pleased. I think we might have got a couple of last-minute winners along the way. And they were really important because as soon as the game's over, you get your phone out, you look at full-time scores elsewhere. Other teams were winning. So there was that doubt about if we'd even get as far as the playoffs. You're 100% correct. In the past, it was a case of we'd be battling for those automatic spots, and this was kind of the booby prize, whereas we came into this one, the playoffs, with Sheff Wed in a completely different frame of mind.
I think as well, Alex Neil's appointment would have the disappointment of Keane not coming. Would have some fantastic football from Lee Johnson's team. He could get his team playing some really nice football, and his interviews were on his press interviews were a joy to behold. If you were into, I've lost that glib phrase he used to use all the time, but he had a fruity way of talking about the game. We're thinking Roy Keane's coming to bail way out and bring back the good times. And this guy, Alex Neil, arrives. And Alex Neil, I mean, to be fair, when he was being interviewed by the media, he looked like he just wanted to say, step outside and I'll give you a fight. He just was that kind of character, He was like that as a player. He was, I saw him play a couple of times up in Scotland, and he was a hard, gritty sort of character. And he sorted the defence out. I thought that's what he did. He came in, he got us solid, and he got us through to the playoff. And it was just chalk and cheese between Lee Johnson and him, He wouldn't say what he was, he'd be interviewed, and the media, I used to feel sorry for the press guys, trying to get out of him what his plan was and what he was going to do. And I mean, he just looked like he didn't want to speak to them, And I was probably like a lot of other supporters at that point. I never thought I thought we'd blown it. And then ergo we end up in the playoff. And two fantastically intense games, the Wednesday game at home and away. I mean, there were such an intensity about those games. You couldn't say they were enjoyable. They were. For me, it was just one of those nights where the tension at home and away was unbelievable. But it is why you go to watch football. It is part of the attraction of the game. What doesn't kill you makes you better. Fantastic. He did a fantastic job, Alex Neil. It was just a shame the way things went after that. But good memories of those games. Really good.
Now, I think two results that sum up Lee Johnson that season with Sunderland was the two Sheffield Wednesday games in the league. We got turned over at Hillsborough off the back of a heavy defeat at Rotherham. And then we stuffed them 5-0, I think, at home, didn't we, on New Year's Day on New Year's Eve at that time,
December.
to go top of the league. So, you got those two polar opposites, which Lee Johnson's sides were more than capable of delivering. You never really knew what you were going to get. But I think when Alex Neil came in, as you say, he made us a lot harder to beat, but he had that, again, we talked about Poirier before, having that confidence, and you kind of believe what he said. Alex Neil was similar. And I think he got that belief not only into the players, but into the supporters as well. You say, Chris, all the supporters, all the fans were looking forward to these playoff games. And I think, yes, that might be by virtue of the fact that we hadn't really been looking like serious automatic contenders for the last couple of months of the season. But, if you look at the results and look at where we were in the league, you could argue it was kind of similar to this season that we've just are having. But, around the end of December, start of January, we were first, second in the automatic promotion places and sort of tipped away a little bit. But Alex Neil came in, really brought a lot of grit to the team. And I think he kind of got everybody on side, didn't he? And everybody was united. And as you say, everyone's looking forward to these two games rather than kind of fearing them.
Yeah, but that was the type of fella he was, wasn't it? But I think I can't remember, it was Andrew or Calvin. One of you touched on the fact that I think in his early games he had a bit of luck. I think we got a couple of last minute draws. I'm sure Elliot Embleton and Broadhead scored a couple of goals early on in his where I think we got a couple of home draws in the last minute in injury time, and I think that kind of set him up. And the other thing that, and he kind of fired you up. He's the type of character that me and Martin said quite a lot on pods, that it's a character at Sunderland. Sometimes Sunderland fans want to, they want a manager where they'll run through a brick wall for him, like your Dennis Smiths, your Mick McCarthy's, your Roy Keanes, your Peter Reeds. And this current manager is brilliant in a different way, where he almost calms everyone down. Whereas I think the more successful managers at Sunderland have always been the ones that fires people up in a way, just because of the way the area is. And the other thing about that Alex Neil seemed to do in every single game was he seemed to have a plan for the opposition, and this was a perfect example, because Sky Sports did their usual this is the Barry Bannon show, and of course Alex Neil asked Luke Knight to follow him to the toilet if that's where he went during the game. But the point is, talking about those ticket sales, I mean, part of that was how Alex Neil was that quietly defiant manager that basically you wanted to follow into war, essentially, in these playoffs.
That's right. And it was funny, I was chatting to Gav the other day about something similar, and traditionally what's worked as a Sunderland manager is somebody who manages the whole club, not just managing the team, but he actually manages the whole club in terms of the fans as well as the players. And I think Alex Neil kind of galvanised everybody. He didn't actually go off the best of start. I think when you look back through it, it was in his fourth game that he managed to get his first win. I think we'd lost a couple, or drawn a couple and lost the other one. But once we kind of got going, we built up that, it's that watchword at the minute, isn't it? We built up that momentum to drive us into the playoffs. But it served us really well. And as you say, Chris, we had a tactical plan, but he also, I think, took the fear out of it. if you're looking at the two legs as a whole, I remember the press conference he did before we went to Hillsborough, and he was asked, are you worried about how the team's going to handle the atmosphere at Hillsborough? And he'd said, what we bothered about a few people saying boo. Like he had that attitude to it. Whereas other managers might have actually bought into that a little bit. And I think he was the perfect manager at the perfect time for Sunderland. And over these two legs, I think he managed it brilliantly because, as a tactical plan, a strategic plan to get over the opposition over two legs, he did it fantastically well. But what's interesting, if you look at the squad that we had, including the subs, we actually had a really good team. We had players like Trey Hume and Dan Neil were on the bench. Jack Clark was in the team. You say Luco Nine played a really good role in the centre midfield to sort of stifle Barry Bannon. But what stands out for me is the lack of subs that we made. Remember in the second leg at Hillsborough, he did not make a sub until we'd scored that equaliser in the 90th minute. He just kept the same team because they were so well structured. And I thought it was a brilliant sort of display of how a manager can really impact the team from that tactical and strategic level.
I think that underlines the points we're making about he was very calm and quiet, but confident in his ability. He was able to cut out the noise. He would never be somebody who would be pressured into making team changes or substitutions because there was a load of fans wanting it or the press were getting on his back. He was very good at just being matter of fact. And the team were working, the team were doing what they needed to do. So why risk that until the time's right?
I tell you what's an interesting thing there, you say, because if you look at it in face value, and you look at Alex Neil and look at Regis Lebris at the moment, you've got on face value you've got kind of two very different characters, but those attributes you've just outlined there are actually the same as Lebris. He doesn't pay attention to what's going on around him. He's got confidence in what he's doing. He's got confidence in his players. He creates atmosphere around it. This is a plan. Go out and do it.
Yeah.
So, while on face value they might be very different, there is some similarities there. But obviously in the first leg we got ahead. Ross Stewart scored a lovely goal just on half-time. And going into that second leg with that 1-0, it was only a slender lead, wasn't it? It was a nice lead to take into Hillsborough, Chris. It's a big game to go and play, with some boos to accompany you as well.
Well, that's it. Well, just on that, you mentioned the Ross Stewart goal, and I would argue that actually, if you look back to the history of the Stadium of Light, which is kind of just over 25 years, what is it now, 28 years or something like that, you'd argue this is one of the big moments in the Stadium of Light's history.
Yeah.
And you think about the crowd, you think about the occasion, you think about what it ended. I mean, it probably wouldn't have been if we'd went and got beat off Wickham, but in the context of everything and just in that night, because, over 44,000 there. And it was one of those nights where, and I'm really hoping the home leg in the playoffs coming up has a similar edge, because it's one of those, and I always go back to the Sheffield United game in the fog in the first season of the Stadium of Light, where they just had this tinge of electricity. And I know, and it sounds corny, and I hate myself when I'm saying those words because it sounds crap, but it's the only way I can describe it. That when you're there and you feel something.
But that game against Sheffield United, I don't know if you lads agree as well, like there was just something I've never experienced at the Stadium of Light before in terms of the atmosphere, and whether it was just, you say, the fog coming in combined with everything else, but it was just something different in that game and how it felt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, I always remember the team coming out. And I've embellished this over the years, but this is what I remember. Kevin Ball appears out of the fog, looks around all four stands, and he's standing there. And I've dreamt about this. And he says, raises his hand slightly in the air and says, "I am Spartacus." and everybody says, "No, I am Spartacus. We're all in this together." That's what I took from that game. It was a magic night at the Stadium of Light.
We can talk more about that next week. So,
sorry.
But I mean, just on characters like that. I mean, in that first leg, and I was looking to the ratings that we put on the site immediately after the game, and basically it was like Bailey Wright and Danny Bart at the back were kind of hailed it as heroes after the game. You know, they both. It was Bailey Wright who was given the man of the match, but it was basically nothing between him and Danny Bart. And basically, we went to Hillsborough, and I remember. Basically, and it was funny because Sheffield Wednesday hardly had a shot and they didn't put much pressure on us. Patterson, and again, looking back at the reviews, Patterson hardly made a save and we defended really well. But it seemed like on the night at the stadium, like Sheffield Wednesday were really happy going back to Hillsborough with just being a goal down. That they thought, that'll do, we'll do them at Hillsborough. And I think Alex Neil felt this, and I think it was a message he got across to the squad saying, this lot think they're going to take you back down to Sheffield and they're going to do you. And what are you going to show them? You're going to show them that they're not. And I mean, we'll get, because, and again, I'll just go back to this brilliant writer who wrote the preview for the second leg, of course. You know, but the words I used for one of the sentences was, but in the press conferences building up to the second leg, Alex Neil has the demeanour of a man with a plan. So it was clearly, you know, that the fact that he was putting these across, and you know, I always think that press conferences and interviews after the game for managers. It's not them just talking to the press because they have to. It's a link of communication between them and the fans. And Alex Neil isn't telling the media or something that they want to hear or write, or he's not giving them a tagline to stick on their back page. He's talking to us as fans. He's like, we've got this. He's like, it's fine. Don't worry about this. He said, we're there. And it's almost communicating to the players as well. And we, you know, the away fans as well, we rocked up to Hillsborough going, it wasn't like, oh, God, it's going to be one of those Sunderland nights, you know, where we all know, we've all been to one where it's just going to go wrong. We're going to be gutted afterwards. We felt like this is our night. And he made you feel like that.
I think that's, you know, that feeling that Sheffield Wednesday probably had going into that second leg. It's probably one of those things where, you know, as football fans, we pay a lot of close attention to what's going on at our own club, but we don't necessarily pay that close attention to what's going on with other clubs. And Sheffield Wednesday had turned us over at Hillsborough. And they're probably thinking, you know what, we can do these. We've done them before. We've got we got beat 5-0 here last time. We've only got beat 1-0 here. We've kept the score down. We'll turn them over at Hillsborough. And I just think that performance, when you look at that game at Hillsborough, even when we went the goal down, we still had confidence that the team actually they didn't dip after conceding that goal. It would have been so easy to dip because Sheffield Wednesday got the goal, got the crowd behind them. Hillsborough's alive, and the team just held such a confidence for that rest of the game. And you know, for Patrick Roberts to go on and score that goal, Jack Clark going down the wing, knocking in, for him to have that energy to still, I think he started to move off and he burst into the box, didn't he? It's such still a fantastic goal to watch back.
It's unbelievable, and the fact that I mean, at that point, because when we conceded, there was 15 minutes left of regulation time, and I just thought that's it. And I saw how the Hillsborough the ground reacted and the fans reacted. It was a full house at Hillsborough. They were up for it. And they thought, we've won this now. And I thought, they've got the momentum. They're going to... But as you said, the way that the players... And this was an Alex Neil thing, that the players just... It almost didn't affect them in the way that they kept on playing as they were playing. Yeah. And it's incredible. I mean, it takes something for a side to just go, nah, I'm not bothered about that. We're just cracking on with our job. And then, you know... And then the 3 minutes into injury time, there was eventually 13 minutes injury time. I remember kind of absolutely dying a death in that 13 minutes waiting for that final whistle to go. But 3 minutes in injury time, like Martin, you touched on, Danny Bart plays a ridiculous ball down our left-hand side with his right foot. And to find Jack Clark in so much space with so much energy, because he got the ball and then burst past his player down to the byline and dragged it back. And there's two things about this, the actual goal, is that I was reading back, and it's interesting to say that people were saying, like, Jack Clark introduced himself this night. And it was funny because I don't think we'd seen the real Jack Clark until this night. And he was fantastic.
He struggled, hadn't he?
Yeah.
He struggled.
And people were going, now we've seen the real Jack Clark. And the other thing was Patrick Roberts coming from the other flank into the middle. Why doesn't he do that anymore?
I mean, Alex Neil, yeah. Alex Neil got a real tune out of Patrick Roberts, I thought. He played some really great football, along with Ross Stewart. Remember, Stewart had been injured and was kind of, I thought he didn't quite look at it when he came back. I thought Alex Neil got a tune out of both of them. And I don't just mean attacking. I mean defensively as well that night. But you're right. It was a fantastic goal, and Paddy Roberts doesn't do that as much these days. I don't know why. Is it a tactic? Is he told not to do that? I don't know.
You hear Martin O'Neill talking about what Cloughy used to tell him that if he's on the opposite flank, he wants him at the back post, and Patrick Roberts was there, to pick it up. But the other thing was Alex Neil's celebrations on the sideline. I mean, that's etched into my mind as a memory. Absolutely brilliant. But it's the type of bloke he was, and Martin's touched on it, because bizarrely we went behind. Managers at this point, almost for the sake of it sometimes, to show that they're doing something, would be, oh no, we've conceded. Right, triple substitution. Come on, I've got to look like I'm doing something. Alex Neil didn't make one change. He just... the calmest person in Hillsborough just went, no, the lads are doing all right, keep it as it is, and then made changes to probably waste time after the goal.
Yeah.
But I mean, you talk about that, how to keep calm as a manager and just trust in the people you've got on the pitch to do the job. And those 13 minutes, bloody hell, I remember them now.
He was keeping calm whilst all of us were losing our heads, I think. Whilst that was going on.
Danny Bart, you've talked about him a couple of times in that over those two legs, and he was obviously a key member of that side. 5 years earlier, he was in the opposition lineup for Wolves as they came. I think they were champions, weren't they? On the last day of the season, they came to Sunderland, and we'd been relegated, and we turned them over 3-0, which is what can happen when you take your foot off the gas and there's nothing to play for. 3 players.
Food for thought.
Made the debuts. just dropping it in there. 3 players made the debuts in that game for Sunderland. Can you remember who they were?
Mumba.
Yeah.
For what?
Molyneux.
Luke
Molyneux, yeah.
Last one.
Oh, have you got any clues there, Martin?
Well, I can give you a very good clue, which will help you get it straight away. Alongside Luke Molyneux, he's just been named in League 2 Team of the Year.
Oh, Denver Hume.
Denver Hume.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I would have thought
I would have struggled. Yeah, I needed that clue. I would have struggled with that one.
And for another point or two, who scored the 3 goals?
Did Mumba get one of them?
Nah, he did not.
I want to say Paddy McNair.
McNair got the last one, yeah.
What was that lad on loan from Liverpool?
Yeah, no, you're on the right track. Ajaria.
But I can't. Yeah.
And
come on, Mark. We're quite this from our memory, man.
You have to, if you're going to do this properly, you need to remember the good as well as the bad. Another lone player got the other goal.
Oh, from Ashley Fletcher, Middlesbrough.
Correct, well done.
Lad.
Yes.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Oh, good shout. Good shout.
And obviously, Chris Coleman had been removed from his position before this game. Who was in charge?
Oh, I've got an idea, but I don't know if the other lads want to jump in.
No, go on, Andrew.
Well, I hope this is right now. Was that one of Robbie Stockdale's?
It was indeed, yes.
Days in charge?
Yeah. It certainly was.
Maybe we should have given him the job full time.
See, in my head, I was going to say the Borough lad because I couldn't remember his name.
Yeah.
He had a couple of... He had that weird caretaker game where he shared the duties with Billy McKinley. That might have been a Waite Borough.
Yeah,
and then
was it a cup game?
McKinley went... I can't remember if it was a cup game or a league game, but I can't remember even which manager had left because he stepped in a few times, didn't he? But then McKinley went, I think, to West Ham as a coach the day after, which was a whole whole well-organised mess, I'm sure, behind the scenes.
Well, that shows, doesn't it? We've talked about Kyle, who was in charge for 2 decades.
That's right.
and then we've had so many, we've had so many caretakers and this, that, and the other in recent times. We're not even sure of the exact timeline.
Right. But that was one interesting game against Wolves on this sort of week in history. Another one was in 2010, and we lost 2-1 away at Wolves in the last day of the season. Kenwyne Jones scored. Jack Colback came on for his debut on 77 minutes, replacing Steve Malbronk. He got booked on 85 minutes and sent off on 90. So he had quite an eventful debut. And made it 9 men. Sunderland, Michael Turner had also been sent off by Lee Mason, who was evidently very card happy on that day. And now for a final game for this pod, we did think about doing the 5-0 win over Luton when Roy Keane was in charge. That saw us clinch the title. I remember Charlie Hurley coming out after the game when we were in the away end at Luton that day. That was another one that lives long in the memory. And I was also at Notts County in 1993 when Terry Butcher's team got turned over 3-1 and we stayed up by virtue. I think Cambridge United got beat at West Ham. And we all had, people had radios on in the I think Brentford were involved in it as well. And I think we got, turned over 3-1. Absolutely shite. And somehow we managed to stay up. But we're not going to talk about that because we do. We kind of
go on. We all want to. We all want to.
No, I think there's one event on the 5th of May that we probably should spend a couple of minutes on, isn't there, Kelvin?
There is. It's always worth speaking about that game. 1973 lives long in the memory. I was speaking to a young fan the other day about this, and it's funny sometimes when you speak. When I say young, he's about 16, and his what he said to us was, "Oh, I'm sick of hearing about that, man. Shut up." and I thought, I've never spoken to you about it before, so sit your ass down there. You'll sit there and you'll listen to your grandfather. No, what a fantastic year that was. What a fantastic season. What a marvellous occasion. Speaking about that, I watched the final on TV, having been to every single round, every replay. I couldn't get a ticket for the final.
There's a song about that, isn't there?
There is a song about that really, I think over the years I've realised there's about 100,000 of us had been to every replay and didn't get a ticket for the final. But where do you want to start with that? Some fantastic memories.
Well, look, I think the interesting, one of the interesting things about that is obviously Bob Sokol came in I think the November of the season, and things seem to have changed quite dramatically, pretty immediately, really. And we saw in 1992 when we got the FA Cup final, also on this week in history, that the cup dominated and the league form really fell off, and we were actually pretty lucky to stay up that season in 92. But in 73, the cup run seemed to kind of have the momentum and help the league form as well. So, when Bob Sokol came in, can you remember what you thought about that? Because an ex-long-standing Newcastle captain coming in.
Absolutely underwhelmed because we'd heard that Revie had been interviewed, and I believe he was. We'd heard that Brian Clough had been interviewed, and there was a lot of excitement about Cloughie. People were very excited at the idea of Clough coming in to manage with. And then it was announced that Stokoe was the manager, and he didn't even come straight away. I don't know if you know that. He was at Blackpool, and I think they were in the quarter-final of the League Cup. And he said, "Oh, I'm not coming until until Blackpool's played the quarter-finals." So, and he was there was a lot of crack about him being a Newcastle lad. Well, I don't know if you know this. His dad was a Sunderland fan, and Sunderland were his first sort of football love. I don't think he spoke about that much, but I've definitely seen stuff where he has acknowledged that.
Yeah, I think I did a piece on the site about the semi-final a few years ago, and I dug up something that Stoker had said that as a lad, his first football experience was going to Roker Park, and his dad taking him to Roker Park, and he grew up in a Sunderland household.
Was Milburn the same?
Yeah,
didn't he? I think he had a similar.
He did.
You know that Jackie Milburn, he really encouraged Bobby and Jackie to go and sign for Sunderland, because at the time I had this reputation. He was. And at the time, we had this reputation of being a club that would bring young players on, and he really felt that they would have been better off going there than going to Newcastle. I think that was his response to Bobby, especially. I think was courted by Newcastle, and he recommended that he should go to Sunderland. As it was, of course, he ended up at Man United. But when you're saying Stokoe's impact, I mean, in terms of a character, he seems to have been, to a degree, chalk and cheese with Alan Brown. You know, he seemed to have a kind of relaxed kind of way with the players. You know, he gave them the head a bit. He wasn't soft, but he didn't. I always. Sort of when I think of him, he was a guy who managed. He didn't feel like he had to have every base covered, whereas Brown, you know, it was every base and some. You know, he seemed to be hyper organised, Alan Brown. But you can't get away from the fact that you look at that team that walked out onto the pitch at Wembley, and I mean, 9 of those players were Alan Brown's players. Either came through the youth system or he bought, you know, in his time. What Stokoe did, I think, was he took the shackles off them to a degree. If you were watching Sunderland prior to Stokoe's arrival at the club, most of the time you'd feel that the team was playing well within themselves. You know, you could see we had some good players, but there was just something that was never that never quite worked. That was never quite right, and Stokoe just seemed to, you know, he was the catalyst, the trigger for those lads finding their feet. And moving on, but the change didn't happen straight away. You know, I mean, we were in a relegation fight for most of that, for the best part of that season, and that was one of the things that, as a young lad, I mean, I'd be 14, 15 at the time, and honestly, I thought my head was going to spin round 3 times and fly off. I didn't know whether we were, you know, we're going to win the cup or we're going to get relegated. So, do you know which was it that was going to happen? We were 19th going into that Notts County away tie in January, 19th, and we'd had a break for, there was a flu epidemic, and that 2-week break, I think it was, with the league, it just allowed Stokoe a little bit of time to take stock. And I think that was, if I remember that rightly, that was when he brought in Ron Guthrie and David Young. Brought them in from Newcastle in that period. Much to my disappointment at the time, I always liked the young players. I used to get taken to the youth matches, and Keith Coleman was at the club. He'd been a good young player. I think he was captain of the youth team, and I always liked him. Joe Bolton was just starting to hit his straps, you know, and I really, really liked him. He was even as a laddie, he was a thunderous player. and he was a great attacking fullback with the youth team, but he could put a tackle in. They sometimes played him in midfield as well. So there was these youngsters, but Stoke obviously decided he wanted a bit of experience at the back and brought in these two lads. Guthrie never let anybody down. He was one solid citizen, and I tell you, he was a canny attacking fullback. If you watch that final, you know, and if you just track Ron Guthrie's offensive work, he does quite a bit of work offensively in that game. Deceptive he was. He was a deceptive attacking fullback. But we were in trouble. We were looking like a team that was going to go down. Stoke, it took him a while to get his best team, to get the team to play the way he wanted them to. You know, even going into the fantastic Man City away game, we were still in relegation trouble until after the Man City at home tie, that replay. Yep. I remember coming out of that game thinking, my God, we're going to do this. Something, you know, you really felt that night something was going to happen, something extra special was going to happen.
Yep.
And relegation was no longer on there. I felt like we were going to finish mid-table, we were going to be safe. All the while, and I guess this is the theme, all the while, Stoke played his strongest possible team in every game. Every game he played his strongest possible team. I'm not making. There's no judgment there.
No.
That was more comment on his strategy was to play strongest possible team.
Well, I'll raise you on that, Kelvin, actually, because, the first thing I just wanted to quickly mention, because I did a piece on the appointment for the On This Day piece on the thing, and I went back in the archives and the newspapers, and the newspapers had us linked with Billy Bingham, Len Ashurst, Tommy Docherty, correct, Dave Mackay, Charlie Hurley, Jack Charlton, Brian Doyle, Harry Potts, Jimmy Hagan, Len Shackleton, and some shy fella at Derby County called Brian Clough. So those are the people we were linked with at the time. Massive names in there. But the other thing, I mean, you touched on it there, that, you know, in this running, Kelvin, March. I mean, you look at March, we played 8 games in March, I think it was, which was absolutely ridiculous if you think about it. But then you look at April, we played 9 games, and I think we had 8 league games in 20 days before the cup final.
Yep.
And then there was
correct,
a sequence in that 8 games, there was a run of 3 games in 4 days. We went to Hull City on Saturday the 21st and we won 2-0. Then we went back to Roker to play Cardiff on Monday the 23rd and won 2-1. And then we finished it with a trip to Nottingham Forest the very next day on the Tuesday 24th and lost 1-0. And I was looking at that side, and you were saying that he played his strongest side. That game against Nottingham Forest, he virtually his strongest side, but he put John Tones in, David Young, Mick McGivern, John Lathan, and Brian Chambers were in that one. And then in the next game against Blackpool, which was the last home game before the cup final, but we had Orient a couple of days later, he played his cup final side, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah. And you'd say, was that the plan? I believe for that Forest game that there were players carrying, they weren't necessarily injured, but carrying a knock or two, and that's why those lads got in. Mick McGivern never used to let anybody down when he came in. I always felt a little bit sorry for him. I always thought he was a very, very solid citizen, and that there wasn't room for him in that Wembley 12. I always felt he was probably, because he had a bit of versatility and goals. He could pop up with goals, McGivern. So he was a lad that never let anybody down. But yes, that Forest game, he rested. I don't think Dave Watson played that game. Am I right? I haven't got that. I cannot remember all the players that didn't play that day, but Dave Watson
Dave Watson wasn't in there. Vic Allen wasn't in there. Ian Porterfield wasn't in there. Yeah, he rested quite a few. But I mean, you look at that schedule in March and April, and it wouldn't be allowed now in the modern day.
Yeah. And as supporters, never mind the players, as supporters, I remember as I said to you, I thought my head was going to spin round 3 times and come off. There was no rest. You know, you were you were moving from one game to the next game to the next game. It was fantastic. It was it was all part of the momentum that built up. You know, we got no rest from it, but it was great, especially when you're playing well and winning.
So, Calvin, you said before you'd been to every match in the cup run. Didn't get a ticket for the cup final. If people haven't read your series on the FA Cup run, which I think you did for the 50th anniversary, didn't you? I recommend you go and dig those out and find them because they are brilliant tales. But taking you back to the 5th of May, where were you watching the game? And tell us about that.
Get your hankies out. I woke up that morning, the Saturday morning, and the first thing I did was, remembering that I'm 14 years old, the first thing I did was looked under my pillow, just in case Mum and Dad had managed to get us a ticket. And I was going, you know, and oh man, I broke my heart. No ticket there. And I actually went out. I couldn't. My mother was putting a party on. The next door neighbours had invited us through to watch it on their new colour television. And my little brother, who's my youngest brother, who, you know, is as fanatical about Sunderland as I am. He was flying around 5 years old with his scarf on. I taught him a few songs, including the Bobby Kerr song, which he would never get a row off me mother for singing it. But it used to be funny when he would just sort of run through the house shouting the Bobby Kerr song and my mother shouting after him, you know. But no, I had to go out, and I was nervous. I was coping with disappointment and nerves, and I'd been to every game, and it was a horrible, selfish thing. You know, I didn't want to spend it with my family. I didn't want to have a party and, you know, and be me mum joining in with the songs and all that, you know, and all that. I just didn't want to do that. I'd been on this journey, this fantastic journey, and these weren't the people that I'd done it with. So I was in a right stop with myself. I wasn't happy at all, but I came back, and my dad, me, and my youngest brother Paul went in next to our neighbours to watch it on the colour television. It's probably worth saying, you know, my dad was at the point of going completely blind. And he was a Newcastle fan as a boy. He used to, when Stokoe first got the job, he used to tease me and say, it'll take a Newcastle lad to sort your team out, you know. But he totally jumped on board with the journey, and was really excited about it. But he came from an era where people, that there wasn't the animosity between Newcastle and Sunderland fans the way that is now. He came from an era where there were a whole batch of people that went to both St. James's Park and Newcastle, you know, and he was quite happy for me to go to both, you know. I was taken to Newcastle first, and then Sunderland a little bit later on, and my first trip to Sunderland, I knew I was going to be a Sunderland fan, even though I'd been to Newcastle loads. But the day of the game itself, we were sitting on the couch in my neighbour's room, watching it on colour TV. And the one thing I would say about that, this is more like a golden personal memory would be it was marvellous to look back on that and to have sat there with me dad watching that game. That was a lovely, lovely memory for me. The game itself, yeah, tension. We were talking about that before. I mean, we scored too early, didn't we? But no, it was. That's where I watched it, in the neighbours, in front of a colour television for the first time, and it was a fantastic occasion. Even in our street, I mean, obviously, I was brought up in Morpeth. Was where I was here. I'm in Morpeth, in the middle of Northumberland, and there were houses and lampposts in the street that had red and white on them, and I'd managed to get most of the lads my age. It was a council estate, in Morpeth, and most of my mates along the street were quite, they were into sort of Haway, let's see if Kelvin's team can win, I got a fair bit of support in the street for that. There were a couple of other Sunderland fans in the street, but that's where I watched it. Yep.
Yeah, I don't think that support would happen these days if you're watching Sunderland playing an FA Cup final in Morpeth.
You'd be surprised. At one point, I don't know if you know this, but it used to, the Morpeth Sunderland supporters branch, it was one of the biggest supporters branches out with the London branch. I think only in the mid to late 70s, only the London branch was bigger than the Morpeth branch. But we pulled from there's a little place called Pegswood, about 2 miles away, and Ashington. It was miners in the main miners that had moved up to the Northumbrian coalfield, that brought their football team with them in the main. That's why there was such a healthy support. We used to run, there would be a bus that would go from Ashington and Morpeth to the games. It wasn't, if you had a little bit of money, it wasn't that hard to get to Roker from Morpeth if you were relying on public transport, especially during this run. I mean, the momentum that built up, and sometimes you couldn't get a seat on the bus.
Yeah,
it was chocker. People were jumping back on board with the team, and that, having been through some really rough seasons. That was the other thing. The context to the season was how difficult a few years it had been to watch Sunderland. It was hard work, and then all of a sudden the shackles are off, and we're playing like we've got these two young lads, Hughes and Chewett, who were fantastic to watch in full flow. We've got this colossal athlete, Dave Watson. People call him Big. They often refer to Big Dave. I mean, 6 foot's big, if I'm any judge. But he wasn't massively tall for a centre half. He was just such an athlete. Dave Watson, fantastic athlete. And he came into his own at centre half. And especially in that game, the number of interceptions and headers that he makes, you couldn't have been anything but inspired by him if you were playing beside him. Fantastic player and athlete he was.
Well, I think that is a very, very, very good point to wrap this first edition of On This Week podcast up. I think we'd aimed for an hour. We're clocking on for an hour and a half now, so we haven't done too badly. I like there was some inside betting going on, that would be over 2 hours. So, we've done pretty well.
So I've got a list of questions I didn't even get through here. I'm gutted.
Next year, we'll have to, there's always next year. we'll have to cover the same thing. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be recording episodes covering the sort of end of May, June and July. And obviously that's a little bit quiet period in football. So, we'll be relying on newspaper reports and transfer links and getting into pre-season friendlies. So, yeah, if there's anything that you'd like us to bring up on these pods, just let us know. You can email Haway The Podcast, SAFC@gmail.com, I think is our email address. So if you want to drop us a line, please let us know what you would like to hear. Ahead of next week's episode, we are going to do a very, very, very little hint or two, Andrew, just to whet people's appetites for what we might be talking about next week.
Yeah, going to give you a couple of clues about a player that was involved in one of the big events, and fittingly, I think, given we've mentioned Stokoe and Milburn and Kelvin himself talking about fans who are from a little further north. This player was born in July 1967 in Newcastle upon Tyne, and his middle name was Ian. They made their debut for us in April 1985. Their final game was 10 years later. And if you're still struggling as to who this is, particularly good in the air for us. Not that particular incident, not one that we'll be covering next week, but hopefully from those clues, it'll give you a bit of an idea of one of the names we'll be touching on.
We will, and I think he enjoyed what we'll talk about very, very much indeed.
Yes.
So thank you, chaps, and yeah, hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Keep an eye on the website. We do the On This Day stuff every day, so if you love your delve into the archives of Sunderland history, visit rokerreport.sbnation.com for all of your regular On This Day content, as well as all of the usual stuff that we do. Thank you for listening to Haway The Podcast. If you've only recently just found us, because we did change our podcast feed, make sure you look us up and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. There's already tons to listen to. There's, as well as the usual match previews and reviews, there's interviews with people like Malcolm Crosby and Bailey Wright. There's local journals that Chris has poked and prodded and got the inside story on a load of good things. We also spoke to Gordon Armstrong recently, so that was good fun too. There'll be plenty of pods during the upcoming week. And we, all being well, will be back with the second instalment of On This Week at the start of next week. So in the meantime, it's goodbye from us.
10 lads dressed in red, 1 lad wearing green, up for the cup in London town. That's where I long to be. I couldn't get a ticket for the game, and to see it on the telly's not the same. All the lads and lasses were leaving at the station. I couldn't get a ticket for the game.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.